cape.
Welcome, Wargamers, to Exploring the Realms as we dive into Ghur, Realm of Beasts. Now, up front, I will say there is almost no art that takes place in this realm because, frankly, there weren't a lot of stories here. So I'm going to be throwing up a few pictures that are just kind of artistic inspiration for you. And this realm is also unique in the sense that we don't really have a deep history, but we do have a lot of information in other areas of what the realm is like, and that'll be explained in a little bit. So what is the realm of Ghur like if you're standing in it? Well, it's composed of these massive jagged continents. It's actually much more understandable than, say, like Chaman, which just has these little bubble islands all over the place. This is much more concrete. Traditional continents moving around on plates, like we would understand them. They're very sharp, hard to navigate, tough terrain, generally denoted by wide open plains, blue skies, sweeping savannas, deep valleys, and all these things are crisscrossed with raging rivers of clean water, migratory trails from species going to and fro. You'll see large skeletons littering the earth, and all the dirt and such has kind of a yellow hue to it. But otherwise, it's a very bright and clean environment, and it makes me think a lot of the kind of Grand Canyon Park in the US. Again, crystal blue skies, very vibrant rock formations, very jagged atmosphere, hard to navigate, deep valleys, raging rivers, it's got everything. But here's the thing, those are all physical descriptions, and they don't truly convey what the realm is like. Because those are all facts, we need the flavor. The basic idea here is that the realm of beasts is the natural order magnified. It's lawless, it is untamed, fury made manifest. Everything here is either predator or prey. I just want to read an excerpt here from the core rulebook because I think it's probably the coolest things ever. It says, great migratory trails crisscross the lands, made not only by herds of prowling megafauna and hunting behemoths, but by the features of the lands themselves. A traveler might seek refuge in a cave one night and emerge the next morning to find horizon has changed, the landmarks having slid slightly but discernibly out of position. Here, the mountain moves in search of ice with which to armor its flanks, just as open plain grinds the mountain's edge to sharp gravel, the better to protect its crust from the feet of those who seek to traverse it. The river conquers the hills, gradually carving them apart with rock it is ripped from the high peaks. The hills shiver free from the forests that seek to take root upon them with avalanches of rubble and burrows of root-gnawing stonelings. What the book is describing here is that everything, even the rock formations, the rivers, all the aspects of life here are predator or prey, and they're all doing these kind of, in like on our real world, we would call them like symbiotic relationships that are trying to get creatures off of them or work with other things. Everything is alive and fits somewhere in the food chain. And all the things we find in nature as a species fight for survival, food, and dominance. And this is just this concept magnified into the geological features themselves. To live in Ghur is to enter into a new food chain. And here's the thing, I can promise you're not at the top of it. It's savage, it's visceral, it's primal, and every species there is a survivalist of the highest order. But what kind of people does that environment create? That's always been something that friends of mine have always wanted, and people in the comments have always asked, what does like free peoples look like in Ghur? What kind of human is that manufacture? And for that, I do like to imagine there's a free people army in every realm, and what are they like? What are their kids like? Because I find them very relatable. Well, this is one thing that this section of lore does way better than the other realms we've covered so far. Where others have very extensive histories that happen in the Age of Myth, this one doesn't have that. It doesn't have a lot of history, but it gives us a lot of great detail into what daily life is like here. People here are primarily hunters, and they have to work together as a village to secure meat and resources. Cultures here are often nomadic. To an extent, you have to remember nomadic means something different when the environment moves around you, even if you try to stay still, so you gotta keep that in mind. And it's a harsh environment, and it breeds an incredibly strong, physically type of person. These are great hunters, survivalists, and more. And it might be easy to look at this and say, why would anyone ever live there? What do they offer the mortal realms? And the truth is simply the word food. Every realm has something to offer. Chaman is rich in mineral resources for weapons and armor and things like that. Ghuran has endless forests to offer wood. Well, Ghur has large beasts that can feed a small village for weeks. The food is precious and highly sought after as the land is being cultivated. Remember, we're building massive cities and trade and all those things like that, so the kind of economy, if you will, of Grand Alliance Order requires massive amounts of food, water, resources, materials, things like that. The lore doesn't often touch on like what the war effort requires, and food is a very real thing. Now, in addition to being profound hunters and securers of resources and meat, this also means that salt is vitally important to their existence, which they often get from Akshi, which does a few things. It tells us the kind of person who's here and also how these realms are kind of working together to make a war effort possible. And as I said before, it sounds like I'm saying that all civilizations here are small and nomadic, and that's not true. They can have larger ones, but like I said, being stable and building a full city looks different when the world evolves around you. When mountains move to and fro, it's kind of hard to build a solid defense line. Because in fact, the book itself says people in Ghur don't build walls, because they'll just be torn down. If you build a wall, some big monster is going to come rampaging straight through it. Instead, you put down big pillars of spikes that are pointed outward, so that if a creature tries to do that, they impale themselves and you get dinner. It's simple and effective, but more importantly, it's highly mobile. If you find that the environment is changing around you, you needed that hill for security, or you needed to stay in a certain range of X geological feature, like near a river for food, and that river seems to be bowing away from you, you can pick up your civilization and move and still be relatively secure. First order of business, plant the spikes for defense, and then everything can kind of move and build up from there. The point I'm trying to make is that Ghur doesn't just mean nomadic tribes. You can have larger civilizations, but I think the nature of an ever-changing realm and the adaptability that it requires out of people is going to make cities, in quotations, look very different from, say, Hammerhall. Now let's talk about the history of Ghur. Now this is probably the weakest part of this realm's coverage in the core rulebook. Other realms have like an age-by-age history. Age of Myth has a lot of detail. Age of Chaos, Age of Sigmar, not Ghur. And I actually think this kind of plays into the feel of it. Very few things in Ghur stand for long. Whole place is littered with skeletons, nothing's forever. Again, everything's on a food chain, and eventually everything, even memories and stories and culture and things like that, are going to have their day in the sun and they're going to go away. Most traditions seem to be like oral traditions, so passing down stories from others, so probably detailed histories is not going to happen. And this fits with the kind of tribalistic themes that we've been given so far. But one thing we can put together from these stories from the Bone Splitters, the Iron Jaws, the Core Rulebook, and the Realmgate War series is that the Age of Chaos did not mean the same thing for Ghur as it did for other realms. Because in other realms it was this great darkness. It was like the time the infection spread to their place and they just couldn't hold it back, and everything was kind of just becoming dark and morbid. And the factions of Ghur were a little bit different because they didn't see this as this great existential and physical threat entering and poisoning the entire realm. They saw it as a new competitor entering the food chain. Not only did the orcs not care that chaos showed up, they were like inviting them to come on in, man, the water's fine. Join in this because you have to fight to stay in. And orcs love a fight. There was no great darkness, there was no colossal collapse of civilizations because of the nature of what civilizations have always been there like. This is just one more giant predator, meaning armies of chaos, entering into a colossal pit of predators. And survival was just a part of life in Ghur. And in addition to chaos not having the same kind of impact, the same level of impact in Ghur as it did in other realms, something actually came out of it. The Iron Jaws first appeared in Ghur as a direct response to the repeated attacks from chaos. Chaos would come in, fight a bunch of orcs, orcs would call more orcs to them, it would get big, they'd win against the chaos guys who were just sending little vanguard troops in, and then as orcs fight more and they age, they become much larger and bigger in this constant back and forth of, I fight you, I get stronger, just in time for you to send more troops. You're sending more troops because I'm getting bigger and stronger. That snowball effect we talk about in the Iron Jaws lore videos is exactly why Ghur birthed this new faction. Which is really fascinating because as a whole, that means Ghur, the realm, reacted to chaos in a very different way that we've never touched on in any of the other stories. It is wholly unique for a realm to be like, awesome, bring on chaos, let's have another fight. And this actually carried forth into the Realmgate Wars, which is where we actually first touched down in Ghur in the book Allgates. If you don't remember, the Allgate going to Ghur, the one that let Chaos forces in there in a more kind of stable route, was actually lodged inside of the jaw of a colossal like earthworm, something that's just like cities wide, huge. And there was a huge gate stuck inside of its mouth. They pinned the gate down by having huge forts all chained to its mouth. And if you want more detail on this, I go into a little more explanation of how this thing was set up, but you can go check that out in the Realmgate War series. Look up that playlist. But Order goes down, they're going to destroy all these little forts that are chaining the gate and then try to get the thing under control. So this huge fight between Order and Chaos, who are all inside of the fortresses, ensues, and the Ironjaws come and absolutely decimate both sides of these things. They destroy all the fortresses, let go all the chains, and all of a sudden the giant like god beast sized thing that has the Allgate stuck in its mouth goes free and no one controls it. No one owns it, and it's just like the realm itself, right? All about freedom. Nobody gets to claim it. And then fundamentally that's what Ghur and destruction armies are all about. Let's pause here and talk about ways that we can kind of bring that nature into our models. So now we're going to transition into talking about kitbashing and ways that you can model your army to be from Ghur. Now, going from the lore that we do have in the core rulebook, kind of three main themes kind of stand out. Those are bones, meaning like the literal bones and remnants of these great beasts and monsters that were all across the realm. There's also the kind of tribalistic aspect. How can we make our guys look more feral and wild? And lastly is the theme of beasts, which makes absolute sense. Incorporating models that are obviously animals and beasts into conversions and things like that. So let's head over to the GW site here. And I'm going to be upfront and honest, the best place if you're looking for bone bits, there are two places that I highly recommend going to. And that's going to be the Bone Splitter section and the Citadel Skulls. Now this one's pretty straightforward. You get a pretty wide swath of skulls, and they give you a great detail on which is which and how many of you each you get. And there's just a lot of cool things. If you've seen my Manticore, which I can put up later on, or you can go check over to Instagram, check it out. It is a Manticore that I cut off the Manticore's head and put this beefy monstrosity on top of. And it looks super sick, but as you can see around the edges, there's all different kinds of skulls. Many are human, obviously, but some are demonish looking, some are aliens, which could easily be monsters and stuff in the mortal realms. So it's definitely an option. But a cool place for unique bits is going to be with the Bone Splitters. And here's the thing. I've talked about their range before. Very limited. There's really only 2 boxes for these units. One Boar Rider box makes these 2. One box for ground infantry makes several options. So let's just click on one of them and you'll see what I mean. All of these weapons and everything, they're all individual bits. The tips of the spears are all cool bones that have been chiseled into sharp points. You have rocks as blade weapons. You have fur-lined archery things. There's all kinds of unique, very tribalistic, again, bones and feralness to it. Hand weapons, you can easily cut these off and put those on whatever type of warrior you're running. And the shields are all unique. They don't actually have a lot of like Gork and Mork symbols on them. Most of them are, they don't have a good side of the shields, but for example, some of them are just like bones that have been like roped together, and that's what makes their shield. So very, very cool bits that you can work with. It doesn't take a whole lot to bring those into just about any model range that you can think of. And like I said, a little cutting here and there, cut the hands off, because usually orc hands are a little bit bigger, a little bit beefier than say like a Free People or something like that, even a little bit bigger than a Chaos Warrior. So you want to do that, but the conversion opportunities are pretty plentiful. And moving in with that kind of tribalistic theme, I go back to my default, which is the Flagellants kit. And I love this one. And I can't tell you how many bits there are. It's such a shame they don't have pictures of the sprue on here. If you get a chance, seriously go check it out. What the meager pictures that you get of the unit do not well represent what the actual kits are like. They just look kind of wild and mean, and if you're looking for basic infantry, using these as, say, Marauders, I think there are better sculpts than Marauders for sure, or any kind of just cheap troop. I mean, you can replace them for whatever, and they have a lot of cool bits to add to your existing ones. Like, you could take just the heads and things like that, add them to a free guild army, and you'll be pretty well set. In addition, speaking on heads, if you're doing with something like Stormcast Eternals, Space Wolves have traditionally always been really a great place to get well-sculpted heads for your army. They are bearded, kind of savage-looking. Sometimes they have like bones and stuff tied in as like knots in their beards, and they just look kind of wild. Now, of course, you don't want to buy necessarily a whole Space Wolf army just to get the alternate sculpt heads, but if you know a Space Wolves player, oftentimes they have extra heads laying around because these things make like 3 different kinds of units as well. So there's all kinds of cool bits out there for sculpting heads. This is definitely a big one if you're playing Stormcast, frankly, because one, the heads fit perfectly like into Stormcast armor, and in addition to that, they just add a lot of life to those models. And so when most of a Stormcast is very not bland, but there's not a lot of decor on there, adding a unique head can really go a long way. And moving into our last thing, talking about beasts and how can we theme beast. Here's the thing. If your army has a chariot, simply replacing whatever's pulling that chariot with a more exotic looking model can go a long way to making it look very unique and stand out and be cool. You can incorporate different kinds of mounts. So like say my Chaos Knights usually ride horses, obviously. Put them on a cold one or something like that to make it seem more like animals are involved and make that a highlight. To go for beasts, pretty good places. If you have a large model, the Stonehorn, and Thundertusk kit is legit. As well as any kind of cavalry, Mournfang pack are awesome because they're great because they actually don't take up a lot of physical room. I mean, they're big, they're beefy models. But if you look at here, like the bases are much larger than they are, come out a little bit further. Which I'm saying is, if you have a chariot kit, you could probably get one of these on there, and it won't, won't hang over the base a whole lot. And I think that's super cool. Again, there's some really cool monsters. Now, of course, these are the main bulk of the monsters that this range has. But if you can find a use for them, they're super legit. And of course, the big bad one is Seraphon. And what I would suggest with Seraphon is just go out of your way to do a little bit of a different paint scheme or any kind of things you can do to make them kind of stand apart from just like, we captured a Saurus, or whatever, a Carnosaur, I should say. But this is a fantastic place. These huge hulking beasts are awesome. There's very few models that you can use the actual Carnosaur itself for and kind of get away with just because it is itself so large, and adding any kind of conversion onto that would be like huge. But absolutely, like something like this would be great for if I wanted to put my Chaos War Shrine on his back. Like it's that big, it can support that, and that'd be awesome. Moving down, you have obviously the Bastiladon and a few others down here, if I'm not mistaken. No, oh yeah, here we go. Stegodon, yeah, they're all stock. But these are fantastic uses of monsters. He would actually be amazing for the War Shrine. I might think about that one. Whatever. But yeah, so these are just ways of incorporating animals. You can use, even if you just kind of have Ripperodactyls hanging around. Again, the whole point is look at the GW range and see what kind of bones, tribalistic ideas you can convey, and then also the beast. And those really, as I do all these things, talking about kit bashing, that's really the idea, is like you pick a few flavors and themes and try to bring them, inject those into your army. And with these, it's actually very simple, because the skull kits and the GW skull kit that has like a bajillion skulls in it, the bone splitter stuff, they're just little things that add a lot of flavor. And that's kind of what the whole point is when I talk about conversions and things like that. In addition to that, if you look on the Citadel app, they have a great tutorial for making desert bases. And this is actually what I'm doing for my Iron Jaws right now, who are from Ghur, which is basically you take Armageddon Dunes, which is their texture paint, and then to give it a dry brush with the chopped bone, I opted to do a wash with Cassandora Yellow to give it kind of a yellow tone to it, and also fill in the recesses, and it looks absolutely phenomenal. I absolutely love it. So that's kind of the rich, almost amber, earthy flavor when it comes to basing, but then incorporating those things like bones and tribalistic tattoos is a huge thing you can do. All that stuff goes a long way. So let's wrap up the show by talking about what's awesome about Ghur. So as I reach my favorite part of these videos, and that's simply asking, why is Ghur so cool? I'm actually going to use this time to kind of tack on a few things that's really cool about the realm that didn't really fit in any of the other sections. It has more greenskins of all varieties here than anywhere else. That means the basic greenskin, the bone splitters, the iron jaws, a lot more of them here than other realms. Now, bone splitters are the most numerous. However, iron jaws still exercise a lot of control and authority, which makes a lot of sense for the bone splitters because the great beasts that roam around the realm are perfect for hunting for them, and the mission of the iron jaws to kind of free the realms from all control makes a logical place for them to start. Ghur is kind of a safe haven for them. Now, a narrative idea that's been cropping up a lot lately, at least in my own personal mind, but certainly in the books and the lore, is the idea of control. Order wants control in order to secure sovereignty, that people have a chance to choose for themselves. That's what Sigmar's ultimate goal is. Choose your own destiny. And Nagash wants control to be the supreme authority, right? He's the same thing as Order, no chaos, all kinds of stuff like that, but it's Nagash's will. And Chaos wants control to consume, corrupt, and enslave everything. And this realm, and everything in about it, and what it is and what permeates it, is a natural response to that. No control, no authority, no stability. It stands in direct opposition to every other grand alliance. Ghur is just perfectly representative of destruction in general, as a grand alliance. Chaos wanted to invade Ghur. Come on in, enter the food chain. If you're good enough, it's yours. But you know what? Chaos wasn't good enough. They wanted to take and to hold and to keep and to control. But that's not how things work in Ghur. You can't keep it, you can't control it. You can only survive and hunt and not get eaten by the bigger fish. And here's the thing about Chaos not being successful in Ghur is the lesson of, just keep an eye out, keep surviving, is not a lesson you learn if you assume you are the biggest fish. If you assume that you're the top of the food chain when you walk into the realm, you're never going to make it because you're not adaptable. You're not flexible. I loved exploring this realm a little bit because it's so fundamentally different from what we've seen before. Everyone was killing for a realm gate. Iron Jaws just wanted it to run away, right? They got it, they took it, they could have controlled it, but they let it go. It's the only faction we've seen that just let things go. And the realm gate got to be exactly what Ghur is, which is wild and free. No one owns it. It's super important, really great to have. Nobody has it. And that idea of complete lawlessness, lack of control, lack of ownership is actually a new interesting paradigm. And it plays out in the landscape and environment so well. And as much as I love Chaman, the Realm of Metal, for my Slaves to Darkness, the Realm of Ghur has really grown on me through reading all this stuff. I think it's one of the more relatable realms that we have, not because we understand its environment with the big fantastical beasts and things like that, but one, it's described in a way that, like I said, Grand Canyon Park, like it's physically described in a way that we can understand. That's very relatable. In addition to that, the idea of just like Darwinism to the max, as far as like, the rigid food chain and kill or be killed, everyone is predator or prey, like those are very like relatable things. We understand them and we see them in our own natural world. Obviously they're not taken to that extreme that a mountain is seeking shields from an ice glacier, that kind of thing, but it's stuff that we understand just kind of magnified in a fantasy way. And I think that makes Ghur a very special place in terms of just, if you want to introduce someone to a realm and what a realm is like, it's probably a great place to start because it is so understandable, even though it still maintains that kind of fantastic nature. And those, friends, are all my thoughts on the realm of beasts, Ghur. And I look forward to seeing you in my next Age of Sigmar video. Thank you all so much for watching, and happy wargaming.